Look at what happened when a music teacher told a young student he would never have a hit song. Why the teacher was so convinced this kid had no talent, how many times the student was rejected and humiliated, what gave him the strength to keep going when everyone said he should quit. The moment everything changed when he wrote his first song that connected with people, how he climbed from complete nobody to chart-topping success, and why after 38 number-one hits, he never forgot that. Teacher's words. Stay until the end, and you'll understand how doubt from others can either destroy you or become the fuel that drives you to prove them wrong, how persistence matters more than initial talent, and how sometimes the people who say you'll never make it are the ones who inspire your greatest success. The year was 1962, and in Brooklyn, New York, in a small music school tucked between a deli and a dry cleaner, on a busy street where car horns never stopped honking and people rushed past without looking at each other, there was a music teacher named Mr. Harold Finch, who had taught piano, voice, and music theory for 23 years. Harold was 51 years old, had grey hair slicked back with too much pomade, wore thick black-rimmed glasses that made his eyes look smaller than they were, and had developed over 2 decades of teaching a deeply cynical view of his students and their dreams. Harold had seen hundreds of students come through his classroom, all of them convinced they would be the next big thing, all of them dreaming of fame and fortune and seeing their names in lights. And Harold had watched 99% of them fail, had watched them realize they didn't have what it took, had watched them give up and get regular jobs and forget about music entirely. This had made Harold bitter, had made him believe that talent was rare, that dreams were usually delusions, and that his job was not to encourage false hopes, but to give students realistic assessments of their abilities so they wouldn't waste years chasing impossible goals. Into this environment walked a 17-year-old kid named Danny Rosenberg. Danny was skinny, awkward, with dark curly hair that never stayed combed, thick glasses that were always sliding down his nose, and clothes that never quite fit right because his family couldn't afford better. His parents were Jewish immigrants who ran a small grocery store, worked 16 hours a day, barely made enough to pay rent and feed 3 kids. They had scraped together money they didn't have to pay for music lessons for Danny because he loved music so desperately, because he spent every free moment writing songs in notebooks he carried everywhere, because it was the only thing that made him truly happy. Danny had taught himself guitar, had learned by listening to records and figuring out chords by ear. He had a voice that was unusual, not classically beautiful, kind of nasal and rough around the edges, but there was something in it, some emotional quality that made you feel what he was feeling when he sang. He wrote songs constantly, hundreds of them, most of them terrible because he was learning. But occasionally one would have a spark of something special, some combination of melody and words that stuck in your head. When Danny showed up for his first lesson with Mr. Finch, he was nervous but excited. He brought his guitar, he brought a notebook full of his songs, and he had hope in his eyes that probably should have been touching, but that Harold found annoying because he had seen that hope die so many times before. Harold started with basic assessment, asked Danny to play something, to sing something, to show what he could do. Danny played one of his original songs, a simple thing about missing someone, about loneliness, about wanting connection. His fingers fumbled some of the chords because he was nervous. His voice cracked a little on the high notes, but there was genuine emotion in what he was doing, real feeling that came through despite technical imperfections. When he finished, he looked up at Harold with those hopeful eyes, waiting for feedback, waiting for validation, waiting for someone with experience to tell him he had something worth developing. Harold looked at Danny over his thick glasses, sighed the way teachers sigh when they have to deliver unpleasant truths, and said words that would echo in Danny's head for the rest of his life. "Kid, I'm going to be honest with you because that's my job. You have no natural talent for music. Your voice is not good, your playing is sloppy, and your songs are amateurish. You will never have a hit. You will never make it in the music business. My advice is to save your parents' money. Quit music lessons, get a regular job, and find a more realistic dream. I've seen 1,000 kids like you and none of them made it. You won't either." The words hit Danny like physical blows. He sat there in shock, unable to respond, feeling his face get hot, feeling tears starting to form that he desperately tried to hold back because he didn't want to cry in front of this cruel teacher. He packed up his guitar, mumbled something about thinking about what Mr. Finch said, and left the classroom in a daze. He walked the streets of Brooklyn for hours, the teacher's words playing on loop in his head. You will never have a hit. You will never make it. None of them made it. You won't either. When Danny got home that night, he went to his tiny shared bedroom, sat on his bed, and made a decision that would determine the rest of his life. He could accept what the teacher said, could believe the expert who had 23 years of experience, could give up on the dream and get a job at his parents' grocery store, or find work in a factory like most kids from his neighborhood did. Or he could decide that Mr. Harold Finch was wrong, that one bitter teacher's opinion didn't define his future, that he would prove everyone wrong, even if it took everything he had. Danny chose to fight. He took the money his parents had saved for more lessons and used it to buy better guitar strings, to get access to a recording studio for a few hours, to make the most of what little resources he had. He practiced every single day, hours and hours after finishing work at the grocery store, writing songs, rewriting them, performing at any venue that would let him. Coffee houses where 5 people showed up, street corners where people threw pennies in his guitar case, anywhere he could play and improve. The rejection didn't end with Mr. Finch. Danny spent the next 3 years being told no constantly. Record labels rejected him, said his voice was too unusual, his songs too simple, his look too ordinary. Talent scouts passed him by. Other musicians told him he should give up. His own relatives suggested he was wasting his life. Every rejection felt like Mr. Finch's words being proven right, like the universe confirming that he would never have a hit, that he should just quit. But Danny had developed something that technical talent couldn't teach: absolute stubborn determination, fueled by a desire to prove the doubters wrong. Every time someone said no, he wrote another song. Every time someone said he wasn't good enough, he practiced harder. Every time he wanted to quit, he remembered Mr. Finch's face, that dismissive tone, those words, "You will never have a hit," and it made him angry enough to keep going. In 1965, when Danny was 20 years old, he wrote a song that finally felt different from all the others. It was called "Solitary Man," and it captured something real about loneliness and independence that resonated with people who heard it. He recorded it with a small label that barely had money for studio time, and the song started getting played on local radio stations. Then more stations picked it up. Then it started climbing the charts, slowly at first, then faster. Solitary Man peaked at number 55 on the Billboard Hot 100. It wasn't number 1, wasn't a massive smash hit, but it was on the charts. It was being played on radio across America, and it proved something fundamental. Mr. Finch had been wrong. Danny could have hits. Danny could make it in the music business. Danny's unusual voice and emotional songwriting connected with people in ways technical perfection never would. That first modest success opened doors. Bigger labels started paying attention. Danny got better promotion, better production, more opportunities to write and record, and what followed over the next 15 years was a run of success that few artists ever achieve. Song after song climbed the charts. Cherry Cherry went top 10. Sweet Caroline became one of the most beloved songs in America. Cracklin' Rosie hit number 1. Song Sung Blue hit number 1. I'm a Believer, which Danny wrote for another group, became one of the biggest hits of the 1960s. The hits kept coming. Holly Holy, September Morn, America, Love on the Rocks, Hello Again, Forever in Blue Jeans. Danny wrote songs that became part of the soundtrack of people's lives, songs played at weddings and ball games and road trips, songs that would be remembered long after he was gone. By the time Danny was 40 years old, he had 38 songs that had charted in the top 40, 38 hits that proved Mr. Finch wrong 38 times over. But success didn't erase the memory of that first lesson, those crushing words from the teacher who said he would never make it. In interviews decades later, Danny would still talk about Mr. Finch, still remember exactly how it felt to be told he had no talent, still credit that moment as essential motivation. If Mr. Finch had encouraged me, Danny said in one interview, if he had been kind and supportive, maybe I wouldn't have developed the hunger to prove him wrong. His cruelty gave me fuel. Every time I wanted to quit, I thought about his face when he told me I'd never have a hit, and I got angry enough to write one more song. In a weird way, I owe my career to the man who told me I didn't have one. Years later, when Danny was famous and successful, he tried to find Mr. Finch to show him what had happened, to prove that the assessment had been wrong. But Mr. Finch had retired from teaching, had moved away from Brooklyn, and Danny never found him. Maybe that was better. Maybe the point wasn't to rub success in the teacher's face, but to prove to himself that one person's opinion, even an expert's opinion, isn't destiny. Danny's story became inspiration for countless other artists, other dreamers, other kids who were told they didn't have what it takes. He performed for 50 years, sold over 100 million records worldwide, was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and created a body of work that will be played and loved for generations. Not bad for someone who would never have a hit. The lesson of Danny Rosenberg's story isn't that teachers are always wrong, isn't that you should ignore all criticism and chase impossible dreams regardless of reality. The lesson is more nuanced. That initial assessment of talent is often inaccurate because it can't measure determination, growth, hunger, or the willingness to improve. That what looks like lack of talent at 17 might be just lack of development, and that with enough work, enough persistence, enough refusal to quit, ability can be built where it didn't exist before. Mr. Finch was technically right about Danny's abilities on that day in 1962. Danny wasn't naturally talented, didn't have perfect pitch or classical training or the typical qualities music teachers look for. But Mr. Finch was completely wrong about Danny's potential, wrong about what he could become, wrong about the power of determination and emotion and connecting with audiences. And that's the critical difference. Talent is only one factor in success, and often not even the most important one. This is the true story of how a music teacher told a kid he'd never have a hit, and how that kid responded with 38 chart toppers, proving that sometimes the best thing a doubter can do is give you a target to aim at, a statement to prove wrong, and fuel for the fire that drives you to succeed when everyone said you wouldn't.